In the early 1950s, the United States Air Force was looking for a compact fighter aircraft that could be deployed from a bomber aircraft for short-range missions. The McDonnell Aircraft Corporation proposed a unique solution to this problem, the XF-85 Goblin. This tiny fighter aircraft was designed to be carried in the bomb bay of a larger aircraft, such as the B-36 bomber, and launched in midair to carry out interception or reconnaissance missions. The XF-85 Goblin had folding wings and tail, and a retractable nose landing gear, which allowed it to be easily stored in a tight space. However, despite its innovative design, the XF-85 Goblin never successfully took off from the carrier aircraft. Several test flights were conducted, but the aircraft encountered several problems, including stability issues, difficulty in reattaching to the carrier aircraft, and control problems. Despite attempts to modify the design, the XF-85 Goblin was eventually cancelled in 1951, and the project was abandoned. Nevertheless, the experimental aircraft remains an intriguing chapter in aviation history, as a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the engineers who tried to create a compact and versatile fighter aircraft. The Air Force wasn't as convinced that a flying aircraft carrier of this sort could work. Even if McDonnell could work all the issues out of deploying and recovering these parasite fighters, it was clear that only the most capable pilots would ever be able to manage such a feat, and even then, there was a high risk of failure. The McDonnell Aircraft Corporation's XF-85 Goblin was to be a fighter unlike any other. It was tiny, so small it was often referred to as a parasite fighter, and instead of taking off from runways, it was intended to be deployed from the inside of flying aircraft carriers. When the United States was plunged into World War II by the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the nation was not the military powerhouse it is today. The Japanese and Germans were indeed aware of America's potential strength, but that was really more a measure of the nation's industrial infrastructure and population. In 1939, 2 years before the attack on Pearl Harbor, America had only 174,000 troops in the entirety of its military. Of course, within just 6 years, the United States would emerge as the most potent military power on the planet. By 1946, America's military had grown to over 16 million troops, demonstrated the destructive power of its atomic weapons on the world stage not once, but twice, and was beginning test flights on a bomber with the largest wingspan in history. The combination of America's nuclear weapons and this new bomber, the aptly named B-36 Peacemaker with its 10,000-mile range, left America without equal in the days immediately following World War II. But even then, America knew there would be challengers on the horizon. The Soviet Union, already positioning themselves for conflict with the West in the waning days of the Second Great War, was hot on America's atomic heels. The U.S. needed more than a bomber with global range, more than atomic bombs with seemingly limitless destructive capabilities. It needed a way to ensure that bomber could reach its targets to successfully deter a whole world's worth of competition. But with such incredible range, no fighter on the planet could escort the mighty B-36 all the way to Moscow and back. So, the team at McDonnell Aircraft came up with a new idea: have the massive bomber carry its own support fighters. If any aircraft could handle carrying its own backup, it was the B-36. Conceived before intercontinental ballistic missiles came into vogue, the Peacemaker was the largest piston-engined bomber ever to roll through an assembly line. It could carry an astonishing 86,000 pounds of ordnance, 16,000 more than the modern heavy payload Titan B-52 Stratofortress, and could fly from American airstrips to Moscow and back without needing to refuel. The bomber was so massive that one of them was even converted to operate on nuclear power, hanging a 35,000-pound reactor from a hook in its middle bomb bay. With that kind of payload capability, the B-36 could potentially carry a number of small aircraft internally or on external pylons and still have plenty of room left over for nuclear or conventional ordnance. But despite the B-36's enormous size, it's still not large enough to carry any of America's existing air superiority fighters across the Atlantic. Most existing fighters are also excluded for technological reasons. Aircraft such as the legendary P-51 Mustang, which entered service 6 years ago, are obsolete compared to the new jet-powered fighters that have entered service. America's first jet-powered fighter, the Bell P-59 Air Comet, took off for the first time in 1942, and the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star followed in 1944. If the B-36 would secure the future of the United States, its fighter escorts could not be stranded during World War II. Initially, plans were developed for the B-36 and similar bombers to carry their parasitic fighters half open, allowing them to quickly jump into battle when under attack. Labor. However, the Air Force soon scrapped that idea, citing concerns about increased drag, prompting McDonnell's design team to return to the drawing board. Upon their return, they devised plans for a small, egg-shaped fighter jet with retractable swept-back wings and, notably, no landing gear. In the end, Schock weathered the storm, but miscalculated his approach, colliding with the sling and damaging the Goblin's canopy. Despite wearing a helmet and mask during the collision mission, Schock kept his spirits up and controlled the little warrior, directing it to land with belly into the nearby dry lake bed. It was the Payne's first flight, and further tests were suspended for almost 2 months. During that time, changes were made to the XF-85 Goblin to make it more manageable in recall work, including increasing the cutting power and adjusting the aircraft's aerodynamic profile. This was followed by 2 more POW flights before Schock made another attempt to successfully manage both the release and capture from a flying mother, which he completed on October 14. Same year. Try experimenting further to see that the XF-85 Goblin itself is already a pretty capable small aircraft. It is considered very stable and user-friendly for the pilots on board, while also proving to be easy to recover from after a spin. It seems that everything about this concept is working properly, except for the capture process. On October 22, more than a week after Schock's first fully successful flight aboard the XF-85, the tiny fighter once again failed to cling to the slings as the flight completed. After 4 attempts to test the turbulence, Schock finally managed to hook the hook to the sling, only to have it bend when he made contact. The second time, Schock was forced to land the prototype plane in the dry lake bed. The XF-85 Goblin's flight test seemed to prove that the plane wouldn't be able to handle the job of serving as a fighter guard for the B-36, but McDonnell still believed in the main concept. Sanbei Bay. Aware that the Air Force wouldn't want a parasitic fighter with a bad habit of landing every time it was deployed, they proactively came up with a new plan, a new fighter, and a new fighter. New method to recover the jet. Their new fighter will be faster, almost soundproof, and will be deployed and recovered using a ladder system on a telescopic rod that can be extended down below the turbulence generated by the mother.